and we're going to talk about corporate partnerships for nonprofits now, which is really exciting. And as you may or may not know, corporate partnerships for nonprofit organizations is evolving with the move to virtual workplaces and events, and the recently discussed mass resignation and a more purpose-driven workforce. My guest, Heather Nelson, is here to talk about corporate partnerships and how organizations can respond to meet their goal of raising money for their cause. Heather, who I actually know quite well, is the owner and lead consultant for her own boutique corporate fundraising consultancy, BridgeRaise. She works exclusively with nonprofit organizations on raising money from companies. So Heather, thanks so much for joining us today. Really happy to speak with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so why don't we dive right in and let's talk about, the very basics, which is what is corporate sponsorships?
Right. It's such a good place to start because, honestly, there's so many different words and understandings of the concept out there that I do like starting with it. And I actually, in the intro, intentionally talked to you about us talking about corporate partnership and not corporate sponsorship. And that was really intentional because corporate sponsorship really is a purely marketing, transactionally driven situation. A certain number of views or interactions with your target audience leads to a certain cost, and that's sponsorship. For most nonprofits, really pure sponsorship is not the best model. We like partnership, which includes that piece still. So we're not ignoring the value of marketing, but it also embraces some other things that may not be so easily quantified around alignment on values and, employee engagement and some of these other things. And those are the things that particularly respond to some of these trends that we're seeing in the world right now. So it's a really good place to be talking about corporate partnership from the point of view of raising money for nonprofits.
And this is a great segue into my next question is why beyond more money would organizations want partners?
Let's start on the nonprofit side, right? More than anything else, of course, they want revenue to support their mission and their activity. And that, let's be transparent about that when we're having these conversations. However, good partnerships also amplify the organization's message, builds their community. Maybe they need expert volunteers or expert advisors in different areas. So there's these other benefits that can come with a strong partnership beyond just the corporate's investment in the nonprofit.
Okay, so now that we know why organizations want partners, which you've clearly explained, but why do companies want to partner?
Right. So this is super important and often a piece, honestly, that nonprofits really have to check in with themselves about. Because I find if you go to market, you go out and do your outreach, and all you've really thought about is why I want this partnership to exist, then you're not going to be, your messaging is not going to be focused on what's important to the company. And of course, if you want the phone to get answered or the email to be responded to, knowing what's in it for them is a core priority. So what are the companies looking for? Well, there's a few different things, but some that are most common, they're looking for a way to activate or be authentic around a core purpose that they've identified. Maybe as a company, they've identified a core purpose or a core value that they want to see in action or within their community investment department. So either one of those, can be made more authentic and real through a corporate partnership with a nonprofit. Another big common one is around their employees, right? We're seeing disengagement between employees and their companies. We know that more and more employees are looking for companies to have a real value and be making a difference in the world. So being able to show that and then engage their employees in that cause or that activity, super important for a lot of companies. And let's move from both of those and showing that visibly in market, right? So how are they going to tell the story of those values or of what their employees are doing in the world? And they love to have a charitable partner, a nonprofit partner to help in that storytelling and to give visibility to that story. So all of those are some really key ways that a nonprofit can provide value to their corporate partner.
And what are some additional benefits that technology can support?
Well, I think we're really thinking now about how technology can help corporate partnerships. So there's the obvious of, we can meet virtually, employee engagement can happen online. There's, it breaks down geographic barriers and time constraints, right? Like perhaps the volunteer opportunity can be online, it can be short, it doesn't require a traffic jam to get to. So there's some of those things, but also we also want to often back up our partnerships with some data, right? So who are we talking to about this partnership? Who's seeing it out in the market? And with the data we can generate off our websites, out of social media, with some smaller advertising spends. Good data is more accessible than ever to the nonprofit sector, knowing that on the corporate side, they're going to do even more, right? They're going to do more data mining, but as long as you're in the mix and you have a little bit of skin in the game to talk about these things, that really helps the partnership be more even.
And with so many live opportunities to meet people not available, how can organizations connect with new partners?
It's a great question. I mean, I really do believe that building a relationship is a very important piece of building a corporate partnership, and that we can't just start by outreaching with the offer or outreaching with a ton of material, right? That we have to start with building the relationship. So first, we're still looking for being in the places where the people that we want to meet are. And now that could be virtual, that could be using social media tools like LinkedIn to connect with like-minded people or the companies that you're aligning with. So using those kinds of opportunities to provide an intro, like go to the virtual conference that they're speaking at and then reach out through LinkedIn, I think is a strategy that, is underutilized, and especially if you make it personal. So you're not going straight to, hey, I want money, but you're starting with I saw you, this is why we should connect kind of thing. So I do think that in some ways, companies are more accessible than ever because of that. And we're also seeing, because they're working remotely, there's the opportunity to ask for a 15-minute Zoom call and things like that are a lower barrier than an in-person meeting, right? To get an in-person meeting. So I think that you can really leverage the fact that many of us are working remotely these days.
Yeah, I think those are great, important examples of how to nurture relationships, and social media is great. And as you mentioned, a 15-minute Zoom call is really no pressure on anybody. So why not use that strategy? And if we talk about relationships, how about relationships that are stale or being ghosted? Oh my goodness, or current partners where things have changed so much and it feels like it's just not working.
Yeah, it's really good to think about ahead of time, right? I'm sure, Michelle, I have reached out to people and I thought, they'd get back to me right away. And then, it doesn't happen. Sure. It happens to everybody. And I think, it's not uncommon to feel a bit discouraged and just be like, okay, I guess they didn't want what I had to offer, or they weren't interested. And the reality is, we need to follow up. We need to reach out more than once. So I often lean into three sort of different buckets of ideas around this. So first of all, sort of touched on this already, make it personal. So the ideal situation, if you have, a session you've seen or a specific piece of information that they've put out in LinkedIn or on a website that you could comment on in order to start the conversation, that's a great strategy. After personalization, we talk about educate. Is there a piece of information that you have, your organization has produced, a white paper, some, content that might be useful for them? And how can you use that to open the door? So that sort of educate position. And then the third one is add value. So what are some things that you can do that would be helpful to them? So that's where, a volunteer opportunity, an opportunity for their employees to engage with each other. Like, what are some things that are going on that you can offer? And then if you just kind of go along through some of those, that can give you a series of outreaches over time, right? And so you're not just repeating the offer. You've tried the offer, it didn't work. Let's put a few other touch points in the middle and then come back to it, right? And it might take a while, right? It might take a while for them to get to know you and see the connection. So, that's sort of a few things that we talk about when we're getting ghosted or where we're not hearing back. Try again, but with like a off to the side or a different approach, a different angle is, one of the strategies that I try. A little story I had, was thinking about somebody who I hadn't heard back from. And I tried a few of these things. I still hadn't heard back. And, I finally got to the point where I was like, this is really weird. I'm kind of worrying about it and it's being weird. And I finally just wrote the email and it basically said that, been trying all these things, is it something I did? Did I miss the mark? Just let me know and I'll basically stop. And the person wrote back was like, oh no, it wasn't you. I've been so busy with this and that. And I kept on wanting to have the time to really have a conversation. And that, and then so much time has passed, I didn't even realize it. And, sure enough, we had the call the next week. So, it was me making this whole story about why they weren't getting in touch. That was totally not reality. So I encourage people not to tell themselves the story of disaster behind the scenes, but rather that the possibility really could be they just haven't got to it yet, and give the person the chance by again, giving strong communication follow-up, not, sort of persistent that doesn't have value.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a completely insightful conversation about corporate partnerships, and would love to talk to you, Heather, about a few takeaways, what you can provide our audience.
Okay. Well, first I want to start with, let's just focus on the relationship as much as you can. Focus on building relationships on your way to making the offer. That doesn't mean you're not going to need to make an offer. Ultimately, we're trying to raise money here. So ultimately, you do need to have a strong offer that you're going to put forward to the corporate partner at the right time. But along the way, let's build the relationship, going back and forth and having conversations. Right. And so that is one of my key takeaways. I also really love to talk about building sticky corporate partnerships. And those are partnerships that have lots of different points of connection and different places where value sits. And so I've written up a bunch of ideas around that, how to do that. And if any of the listeners would like to read about that, they could join me through my website and bridgeraise.com/raise more money. And they can download a tip sheet that has a bunch of ideas around that.
That's amazing and so generous of you. So thanks, Heather, and thanks for chatting with us all today. And thanks again.